Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on this very, very important conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about AI regulation and ethics and what to expect. I'm thrilled to introduce the CEO of Peterson Technology Partners, Nick Shah, who's going to be telling us more about where we are and where we're going. Nick, can you help get us started?
Yeah, thank you, Tulika. Thanks for having me on this webinar. When we talk about AI revolution, I feel that, we are at that cusp of the major or the next industrial revolution. We are at the forefront of the next chapter for mankind. And when we talk about AI in business, and especially in my business, which is human resource recruiting and staffing, you know I feel that companies have already started experimenting with generative AI in general, and I believe 35% of companies have already started adopting gen AI models, right? Before gen AI, there was a lot of focus on using models to figure out who would be the right candidate for a given position. And then came predictive analytics, right? Helping us decide among hundreds of candidates that we would be getting on a daily basis to see who would be the right person for that fit. Now, with Gen AI, the companies are more focused on automating the whole recruiting process. You don't have to be there physically to start the conversation, communication with the candidate. AI models, especially conversational AI, would be able to do that on behalf of the recruiters, and same goes for the candidates. And I believe we are at that cusp of the next industrial revolution, Tulika.
Absolutely. And speaking of Gen AI think it's really important to talk about where we're going. The global market for Gen AI is projected today to reach 17.41 billion by the end of 2024. And that's indicating significant growth and adoption across industries. So right now, over 37% of businesses currently utilize Gen AI, and that just reflects its importance across commercial enterprise applications. But specifically, 35% of technology companies have integrated Gen AI into their operations. And so that really highlights the technology sector's leading role in adopting these AI advancements. Now, there are also some risks that we really need to be cognizant of. There is a lack of transparency around the training data that's being used. There's legal and ethical implications of using proprietary data in training. OpenAI is currently being sued by the New York Times because of potential data infringement. And then there's third party access and data security concerns that we all need to be really worried about. But I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about the need for regulation beyond these risks as well.
Tulika, you touched on something very, very important, right? Is the technology is moving so rapidly that we need to have some kind of a guardrails in place so that it serves the entire mankind like it's supposed to be, or if it's meant to be. Um, you know, Last Friday, EU, European Union, just passed a major AI Act, which will put some guardrails in place. There is a lot of work that they need to do to define all the policies and procedures, but it's the first step in regulating AI. Their focus, European Union focus, is to put policies and procedures that will help the mankind, but at the same time, it's going to help um, grow AI businesses and AI products. So, but most important thing is how do we regulate AI, right? Especially when we are talking about AI in finance,
Mhm.
AI in healthcare, especially medical, right? Up till now, when it came to AI in finance, people use predictive models, right, to figure out who would get a mortgage or a loan. But now the issues that we are having is this general purpose Gen AI models that could be used for any given reason without us, consumer, really knowing about it. So that information, that the need for clarity is much more now than before, for us consumers to understand how these models will be used, whether it's in finance to give us the home mortgage or the loan for businesses, or in medicine. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And right now the state legislation is completely varied, right? There's a whole patchwork of regulations. There's no unified approach. But when we start talking about regulations, most people, most industries, most leaders don't react very well, right? We don't want to be regulated by the government. And so we really need to talk about what this means in terms of the benefits of regulations. When they are clear, investors are automatically going to feel more confident because there's an understanding that the rules and guidelines of exactly what they are governing their investments, right? There's going to be a clarity that supports market prices as observed in the different geographies. And then these clear and fair regulations, they're also going to help ensure that all players in the industry or sector, they operate consistently. There's a consistent rule board that is being followed. So, when regulations emphasize ethical standards, companies and developers are much more likely to prioritize ethical considerations in AI development. And so, this should really, really include aspects that concern the end user, like privacy, fairness, transparency, accountability. All of this is something that the end user is very, very interested in. And we can't expect every organization to self regulate. And so there are definitely huge benefits for the larger market and society if we look into larger regulations. But can you talk to us a little bit about, as you had briefly mentioned, about the EU and the US? Can you talk to us a little bit about what's going on with the EU AI Act?
Right. I mean, but Tulika, most important for people to understand that, this is, it's a complex journey,
Yeah.
um, to put regulations in place for something that most people don't have a clear understanding, right?
Mhm.
Most people, even to this date, when I talk to people about AI, um, people still think of Terminator days. They think that AI is going to take over the jobs, AI is going to displace so many people. So we need to come out of that mindset,
Yeah.
and embrace it. But the journey, we are just starting on the regulation governance journey, so, and it's a complex one. So, talking about EU, last Friday, they passed an AI Act, which is built on the last December 8th, 2023, right? And it basically now is going to give us a blueprint that European Union countries, or countries that are going to be doing business with European Union, they don't have to be necessarily incorporated or based in Europe, but any company that is doing business with European Union will have to abide by this policies that they are going to lay out, right? But what they are trying to do is basically classify each model into unacceptable, high, and limited risk. That's what they are trying to classify, so the people, the consumers, have some kind of an idea what they are dealing with, right? Their aim is to protect citizens, right, from any kind of abuse, but at the same time, they want to make sure that they are empowering the companies to come up with the models, come up with the business that will help European Union economy grow. But if you don't play within their guidelines, the fines are tremendous, right? We are talking about each fine could be 7.5 million euros, or it could be 1.5% of the company's total turnover. So it's pretty massive.
That's huge. And the European Union is usually ahead globally when it comes to beauty standards or health standards, food safety. And so this is very interesting to watch. There has actually been new legislation that was proposed this month in the US, and it's a bipartisan effort On January 10th, a group of congressmen introduced legislation to regulate AI, and it
Right.
was cross party sponsorship. It was Democrats Ted Lieu and Don Beyer, along with Republicans Zach Nunn and Marcus Molinaro, who sponsored the bill. And the focus was on risks. And the idea is to really require federal agencies and AI vendors to adopt the best practices for handling these risks. And some of these details are going to require the Department to develop specific standards for AI suppliers to the US government, but it's starting. And I think that's where the conversation really is, that it's all starting and we need to be paying attention. Can you tell us a little bit about AI safety, Nick?
Yeah. See, the biggest thing that with with the executive order that Biden administration just proposed on January 10th, yes, it's focused on safety, right? We want to make sure the AI systems that large corporations are going to be implementing or using, or the new products that are going to be coming out, has AI safety in mind for the consumers, right?
Mhm.
They are proposing that the developers of this system disclose the safety precautions, or precautions they have put in place to help the consumers, right? And they should be able to tackle any kind of national threat, competition, for the use in public services. So that is the most important part. But what this order or legislation fails to address is lack of implication, like the European Union. Um, you know, our legislation does not clearly say that, if somebody is using a model that's going to be harmful to the consumer, what are the implications to that company, or the builder of that application, like the European Union is doing.
Right, right. The accountability isn't yet there.
Yes.
But let's talk about the corporate response to AI regulation. So, a majority of business leaders, they don't believe that regulations will slow down the adoption of Gen AI. And so
Right.
this indicates a general confidence in the ability to comply with and adapt to these regulatory standards without hindering their technological progress and innovation. There is confidence. Businesses have the confidence in managing AI risks. They're expressing confidence in their own ability. So the whole self regulation thought process is still in place to mitigate some of these risks. Companies are also hiring very specialized talent and creating new roles on partnering with external consultants.
Right.
There is huge prioritization on risk management. It's become a massive, massive priority, which is why this conversation on regulation is so popular and trending recently. But the challenges in implementing responsible AI are going to include the complexity of scaling AI responsibility. That's huge, right? Like we're just starting to understand it, but let's talk about scale. How are we going to be able to manage it then? There's uncertainty about the regulatory rollout and standards. And then there's also a need for ongoing monitoring and to control to mitigate these risks.
Right. And see, I completely agree that the businesses have the capacity to regulate themselves, but we need to have a third party, which is government in this case, or some body of government that's regulating AI, right?
It
Because
just
without
levels the
that,
playing
and
field,
when we are,
right?
sorry, Tulika.
It just levels the playing field. Like it creates a consistent playing field for all of us to sort of see what
Exactly.
we're working with.
Right, and it's such a fine line, that when you are working aggressively and closely on building an AI model or an AI system or platform, we don't know sometimes when we cross the line, and we need someone to make sure that we stay within the guidelines. Yes, it's important that the businesses need the speed to come up with the new products and come up with the new platforms, but we have to keep the consumer's best interest at heart.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the impact on recruitment itself. Um, please.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It's massive. One of the industry that's going to be using different AI models is going to be the recruiting, right? I mean, the global AI recruiting industry right now in 2023 is around $600 million, and it's projected to grow to 1.2 billion by 2030. So you
Mm,
can understand it's pretty massive. Where most companies, including us, is using different AI models to reach out to more candidates that we possibly can at speed of light. Um, you know, um, Screen them, schedule them for meetings, schedule them for interviews. Um, that is that is the most used case right now in the recruiting industry, right? Second is hopefully it will give us that, remove any kind of bias that we may have right now, right? Because when recruiters are looking at the resume, when recruiters are talking to the candidate, they have their personal biases that can come into play, maybe even on a small percentage. But if you are running it through AI models, hopefully it will remove that bias, screen candidates on their own merits, and bring them to the top. But again, there is always that argument that the training data could be biased because it depends on who is training those models.
mm.
So we will have to see how it plays out this year into next year. But AI industry in recruiting is going to be big by 2030.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I really like, it doesn't sound great, but there is going to be a need for mandatory audits, which is just going to increase the transparency. There's going to be adherence to data privacy standards, right? So recruiters using AI, they have to adhere to these stricter data privacy regulations. So it's just going to safeguard the candidate information as well. And so it's good for the job seeker as well as the employer on both ends. It's going to be valuable.
Tulika, if I can add to what you just said,
Yep.
audit, right? The state of New York did pass a law which
Mhm.
basically says that the companies have to disclose if they are using any kind of AI models for the recruiting.
Yeah.
But the way they have used the language, it
Yeah.
says high volume. Now, it's subjective. High volume could be a small number or a big number. So most companies think that they don't have to be, because they are not a high volume
Yeah.
applicant processing when they are searching for a specific job. So most companies have stayed away from going through that audit or reporting their numbers, or reporting if they are using any kind of AI models for the recruiting. So we need to have clear language as
Yes.
to how or what does that means when you say high volume.
Exactly. And to your point, only a small percentage of these New York businesses have even made their AI use public, right?
Exactly.
Like, what is their utilization? So it's not clear. So there's quite a lot of challenges to expect. Not not smallest of them being the increased cost of deployment. So this regulation may raise the cost of developing and deploying AI systems and restrict their usage in some companies. So I think where enterprises and corporations are really going to have to focus their energy on their legal teams and their IT teams is to just stay informed about the proposed regulations and engage with the policymakers.
Right.
This last part is crucial. It's not, off in Congress or in DC that things are happening. They really need to start being involved, and starting now means being more prepared in the long run. There is some concern that this regulation could potentially be an impediment to innovation. And while AI's growth is dependent on freedom to experiment, to test, iterate, sometimes overregulation can hinder that creativity. So
Right.
that is a valid concern on
That's right.
technological progress. Also, poorly crafted and quickly implemented. To your point, right? The verbiage is just a little messy right now. It's too
That's right.
abstract, so that can block technological development as well, depending on how legally it's understood to its interpretation.
Right.
And then MNCs face additional challenges of complying with regulatory framework across different countries. So it's not just the US. We've been talking about the European Union. What about the rest of the world? So there's a major need right now, and nobody is contesting this, for re education. In 2022, a PwC report showed that 85% of businesses were reevaluating their AI systems for regulatory compliance. And that has triggered the development of new procedures and the education of employees. And so there's a whole domino effect. So the regulations, they don't just shape the business environment, but they're also going to affect internal operations and how employees are handling the AI technologies. I know we have faced that at our own organization. Investing in continuous education, which is something we also feel very strongly about, is going to be crucial. It's not going to be a nice to have as corporations and their workforce start to navigate the complex web of AI regulations. And then these programs, they will foster a culture of regulatory compliance. That's down the road, but that is the goal. And the idea is to strengthen the organization against potential legal and reputational risks, because that's really what's on the line. And then finally, an informed workforce is most certainly better equipped to leverage AI
Yes.
effectively, and then balancing its potential with the ethical and legal boundaries. Right. So,
Yes.
what do you suggest corporations do at this stage?
My recommendation to all my clients or the companies that we are talking to is invest in educating your team, right? And start at the highest level possible, right? This is not something that you can say, hey, I'm going to delegate to my line workers, and it's their issue. This is at the highest level possible. So I'll give you my own case in point. I have enrolled in so many AI training. My marketing team is going through the training, my sales team is going through the training, my recruiting team is going through the training, just to understand um, what everything that we are doing, what is the implication of it. You want to be well educated. Once you are using any kind of system, is how that data which we are collecting is going to be processed, right?
Mhm.
Where is it going to be stored? How is it going to be used? Those are the most critical elements that you need to look at. And don't just, yes, systems are important, but ask the question, right? If you are working with one specific platform or a software, ask those questions. Hey, where is my data going to be saved? How is it going to be used? Will it have access, public access, where tools like chat gpt can come and read your data? So having that privacy education is going to be the key.
And to do it now, right? Like, don't wait. Like, this is the time to get prepared and get ready and move forward. The proactive approach is going to lead to just having a competitive edge, right? Like, you will have that advantage if you move now.
And what I would say, as a company, you should make that information public as to how you are using different AI models, so that the consumers that you are working with, they understand, as a corporation or a company, how you are protecting that data, how you are using it. So having that clarity will be helpful. It's going to put the companies in better public light, without companies or regulators coming and asking you for it. So it's all in all, it's a really great idea to be at the forefront of it, letting regulators know, letting the consumers know that how, a, first of all, what AI models you are using, b, what safety measures you have put in place, and how you are storing consumer data. I think that would be a good starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, and in extension of that, we're talking about outside, making sure that you're compliant. You need to empower your staff, your workforce now as
Absolutely.
well, right? So let's talk
Hmm.
about what business leaders can do. It's very, very important. This is not free. You need to make sure that you are allocating resources for this AI oversight. So prioritize the budget, the human resources for overseeing AI deployment and management. This is going to ensure that your systems, your AI systems, are aligning with regulatory standards and organizational ethics. And then you need to make sure that you're identifying AI savvy legal counsel. And this can be tricky because legal experts are sort of becoming, some are proficient, some are not quite. So you need to really find the right ones that ensure that they're mitigating any legal risks that you might stumble upon. And then finally, I would recommend that you incorporate AI awareness in the role itself. So we have to start updating job descriptions to include AI awareness and review those responsibilities. And this is going to ensure that new hires are equipped and they're not blindsided to handle AI related tasks and understand the ethical and regulatory implications. We've all heard about cybersecurity hacks in the news. We've heard about breaches with government. These are really, really serious. The implications are huge. And so we need to be very proactive about handling the job descriptions for anyone that we bring into the workforce.
And Tulika, it's going to start with the training and
Yeah.
understanding, right? That's the most critical part. Like I was saying before, that companies need to educate the senior leaders that can trickle down that information to their managers or management team down to their line worker. Um, that how they can keep best practices in mind when they are dealing with any kind of AI models,
Yeah.
and if they see any kind of not threat is not the right word, but if they see any kind of unethical usage of that data or the AI models, they should know where to go and report that to, right, within the company, so that the companies can make necessary changes, to make sure that it's the data or the AI model is not harmful to their own businesses or to the consumer.
I totally agree with that. And again, I know I'm repeating myself here, but we really, really have to invest in AI education. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. 82% of people are presently aware of AI and the hype around it, but 50% of them, according to KPMG, say they don't understand AI or when and how it's meant to be used. That's huge. That's half of our population. Like, that's nuts, right?
Right.
So again, we need to be very clear about the effective use of technology. Let's provide the education and training to make sure that employees are equipped. Let's foster a culture of continuous learning, like you just mentioned. Let's encourage employees to stay abreast of these new technologies. There's really no wiggle room on this. You have to upskill. Previously, it was something that if you had time, now you have to make time. And then we need to mitigate the anxiety around this new technology. So different generations respond, to new
Right.
innovations differently. And so we need to make sure to get rid of that anxiety and assist everyone to use this in their roles. And once that happens, employees are much more likely to embrace these tools rather than view them as threats to their job.
And Tulika, to add to what you are saying, this is no longer just information technology department or IT department within the company. This
Absolutely.
is now going across the org within a company, and even beyond it. Now, this has um, it's across the company that everybody needs to look at. So that's the most important part, because I still see people when they're, it's IT's problem. It's not. It's no longer just IT's problem, right? Because this is going to impact um, everyone, regardless of which department you are, right? I mean, take case in point, marketing, customer service. So it will have implications throughout the company that you are running. So it's important that you educate everyone within your company, the do's and don'ts of AI models, so that it makes the governance regulations much more easy to implement across your company.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of work to do. And we can't, have our heads in the sand. It's a really, really important time. It often feels like we're in the Wild West right now, which, in we kind of are, right? But we
Yes, we
need to
are.
make sure that we're prepared. And the only way to do that is to just get in. The water's fine. Just get in, and we have to really understand what's going on.
And
Nick,
keep that in mind, Tulika, that this is a journey. I mean, this is not one and done. It's going to evolve. 6 months from now, when we talk about it, we will be talking about a completely different issue or the news with AI governance and regulations, because it's moving at a rapid pace. I am all for governance and regulations, but whether the government or the private companies or public companies will have to find a balance between
yeah,
growth and governance.
Right.
It's a balancing act, but we need both for AI to be successful.
And it's a fascinating time. And some of the studies that we spoke about, some of the stats we spoke about, they will be dramatically different in months. And that's something we've never seen before, right? This is the maximum innovation we've seen in the shortest amount of time. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I hope this was beneficial for our viewers, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having me.